This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel, broadcasting remotely. This Wednesday, Connecticut begins to open up. But what does this mean for parents who must return to work? Some daycares have stayed open since the start of the pandemic to help essential workers like hospital and nursing home staff, but many providers also closed. This public health crisis isn't over. Will daycares be able to reopen while following state and federal guidance, like implementing smaller classes or groups to limit the spread of the coronavirus? And can they afford additional staff? And what happens to summer camp programs? Today, Where We Live, the Commissioner of Connecticut's Office of Early Childhood, Beth Bye, joins us for the hour. Are you a parent? Do you own a daycare? Or do you provide summer camp programs? Let us know how you plan on reopening, or if you're worried that it won't be possible. You can join the conversation, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR. And as always, find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Joining the show on Zoom is Commissioner Beth Bye, again, of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Commissioner Bye, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Lucy, for having me.
So we're 2 months on in this shutdown. Now the state's slowly beginning to reopen this week. How many licensed daycares are in Connecticut, and how many have been able to stay open, Commissioner Bye?
There's a balance of both family childcare and center-based care, and about 60% of the center-based programs 60% of the family childcare homes have remained open, and between 30 and 40% of the centers have remained open. The rest have closed. Right now we have a little under a third of the centers open, but more are looking at reopening as things slowly reopen.
And when you talk about family home daycares, they've been able to stay open, more of them, because they have a much smaller group setting than, say, a daycare center?
Well, that's part of it, I think. They have tight relationships with their families and understand, that some families really need them at this time. They are experiencing lower numbers of children in their programs as many parents have chosen to keep their children home. So, they've been struggling too with some of the challenges that all businesses are facing. But most of them have remained open.
So what does that mean when there are fewer families in these family home daycares? Again, not very many daycare centers open. What have you been hearing from providers about how they're going to be able to remain open and have the budgets to do it?
Well, I think we're at a time of incredible crisis for childcare. The business function and structure of childcare was already challenged before the pandemic. And the public health guidance is really important at this time. And we've been working with the Center for Disease Control and the State Department of Public Health. But as you mentioned, that requires smaller group sizes. So the businesses cannot have the same enrollment as they would have had previously. It's cut in half. And add to that, parents are going to come back slowly, not all at once, the minute programs open the door. And these are individual family decisions about returning to childcare. But we know from the Bipartisan Policy Center that it'll take a while for families to come back and centers to reach their full capacity. So they're in crisis right now, really.
So when we look at Connecticut, how many childcare slots are we talking about, Commissioner Bye, that may be lost?
Well, according to the Center for American Progress, Connecticut could lose as many as 45,000 childcare spaces, as programs will struggle to first reopen and then stay open. So we've just surveyed childcare centers in Connecticut, and 70% have said this is very detrimental to their business, and lost revenue and public health concerns are their biggest challenges, as well as supplies. So that survey is going to guide how we use our remaining federal dollars to support programs staying open.
45,000 slots, that's a lot of spaces for children. So what are some of the consequences that one parent may not be able to return to work? Or I'm just trying to figure out what that means for so many families out there, Commissioner.
Well, it's a big, big challenge. I mean, childcare is really part of our workforce infrastructure in Connecticut and across the country. And so we have been working with Congress, with FEMA, and other organizations to say that we need funding to help childcare get through the next 12 months if we want that infrastructure when the economy comes back, because without it, it means that some families will fall into poverty, stay in poverty, and parents will be forced to make difficult decisions about how to both make a living and have childcare supports. So it's a pretty difficult situation, and that's why we're looking both at federal sources of funds and trying to maximize the use of the funds that Connecticut got because of the COVID crisis.
At the same time, I'm thinking about all of those very essential childcare workers that families have come to rely on that may have either lost their job or been furloughed. What's the future look like for them?
Well, I think there will certainly, be a demand for childcare. What it will look like, we're not entirely sure. But they're concerned about their jobs, and centers are concerned about staying in business. So we're doing some things like really leaning in. We had a grant from the 4CT group and the Regional Funders Collaborative to try to open up 10 support networks for family childcare homes because they are under stress. And then we're looking for ways to support the centers through this time. But it is a pandemic, and we just don't know what it's going to look like a month from now or 2 months from now. And so we've got to do all we can to help the programs reopen. And they said, cash flow is the number one thing they need help with, as well as personal protective equipment. So we're going to do our best to support them. And we've been able to support the state-funded child care centers because there was funding in the state budget, and we've been able to stabilize those programs. But the private programs have not had that kind of support. So we're really turning our gaze to them and think about how in the month of June can we help those programs.
We're getting a lot of social media comments. Commissioner Bye, again, she's commissioner of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Elissha on Twitter writes, I've been lucky to have my daycare stay open. Class sizes are significantly reduced. Staff are wearing masks and CDC guidelines are being followed. So tell us a little bit more about that, Commissioner Bye. When we think about class sizes, how many children can be in a daycare setting, and what's the teacher-child ratio?
Yes, we are following CDC guidelines, and we've been working closely with Dr. Carter and Dr. Sosa at the Department of Public Health, because for all of us, public health has to come at the front of all of these concerns. And so the class sizes are 10 per classroom and program sizes of 30. Now, if programs can show that they can maintain separation among groups, they can apply for a waiver and serve more than 30 children. But I have to have a big shout out to the childcare workers who've been on the front line. And it's clear that they have been following the protocols. Children are screened on the way in for temperature. If they have a temperature above 100, they cannot come in, and staff are screened as well. There is hand washing, there's enhanced cleaning, and the small groups, and now the masks that are being worn by the staff. So these measures have been pretty effective, to have almost 1,500 programs open during the pandemic. And these programs have been taking this public health guidelines very seriously.
Let's hear from one of those child care workers. Elissha Park joins us now on Zoom. Again, this is Where We Live. You can join us too, 888-720-9677. But Elissha Park is a preschool teacher at Educational Playcare in Avon, Connecticut. Elissha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we were talking about how this is all possible during the pandemic. What did Educational Playcare and Avon have to do to accommodate some of the families that were considered essential workers?
Well, within that first week or so of the shutdown, we had a dramatic reduction in numbers. My class, I teach pre-K 4-year-olds. My class went from 20 to 1 within a week. So my center actually has 4 buildings. We did close down 2 of our buildings, and for the people who stayed, we kind of combined into classrooms. As Commissioner Bye was saying, we've kind of had to follow all the CDC guidelines for cleaning. Educational Playcare centers all are equipped with Zono machines, which we use to sanitize toys. So we are pretty much using those constantly. We have 2 machines at our center. So we're putting all of our toys on a daily basis, multiple times a day, through those to sanitize. We use disinfectant on all the surfaces at all times, every 20 minutes or so during drop off and pickup times. And of course, we're wearing masks. We're not letting parents into the classrooms, and we're taking everyone's temperature who enters the building.
We're hearing that it's essential for workers to wear a mask, but when it comes to children, and especially when I'm thinking infant care, children are constantly putting things in their mouths. It must be really stressful to have to really double down. And how do you work on sanitizing as much as possible, Elissha?
Well, of course, we have the staff in our centers to help. We really work together as a team to get stuff out so they can put things in the Zono machine. We're taking even our playgrounds are being sanitized between groups, where we're putting disinfectant on all the hard surfaces. The kids are really used to seeing us clean. It's really part of our day, between after meal times and after art activities. We're always cleaning the tables anyway, so it's kind of built into our schedules almost. So the kids are very used to it.
When it comes to costs to run, again, the educational Playcare centers in Avon, you said there are 4 different buildings. I believe that's what you said. When it comes to thinking about cleaning those, but also staffing, because enrollment has dropped, how have you seen your staff numbers change?
We had a lot of staff who voluntarily left because they wanted to make that choice for themselves and their family. We've had last week, we were actually able to reopen one of our buildings, which has been exciting. Kids are trickling back, and we took 2 teachers back last week. We had at least one more staff come back this week. So we're looking forward and moving ahead, and we're really looking forward to having more staff and more kids come back in the next few weeks.
As Connecticut starts to slowly reopen, what are some of the concerns that you and your colleagues have, Elissha? Do you need more guidance or support from the state?
I think everything's been very clear. The biggest thing is the dramatic decrease in size. My preschool building usually holds, I would say, about 70 kids on a daily basis. At this point, and probably throughout the summer, we can only have 20 kids in that building. So we do have one more building yet to reopen, so we'll be able to accommodate more children and more staff, and we're looking forward to that. But I think the guidance has been very clear, and we have been keeping everything clean. Everything's going really well. The kids are safe, and I don't think they've noticed much of a difference in the quality of care or in the safety. It's just the increased cleaning.
Commissioner Beth Bye, I wanted to have you come back into this conversation. Earlier, we talked about 45,000 childcare slots could be lost in Connecticut, again, because of the pandemic, because of social distancing guidelines, trying to keep things safe. I'm wondering what kind of conversations you've had with the governor about these challenges when it comes to childcare.
Yes, I've talked with both the governor and the lieutenant governor over the past few days about these challenges. And of course, the governor's had a big focus on workforce, and the governor's workforce council is focused on this challenge and has been making recommendations about ways that we may be able to support it. I think he sees childcare as essential. He's made that really clear during this pandemic. He understands how important it is. He was on the line with me as early as 6 this morning, sending an email asking about, how's the childcare going with the reopen, and how can we support various groups of workers who are coming back online. So I think it's high on his list of importance for, as well as for David Lehman, and DECD has been working closely with us as well. So we sort of see this as a critical factor for reopening.
Commissioner Bye, before you became commissioner, you were a longtime state lawmaker, state senator. You have been involved in early childhood education for many years. How worried are you as we move forward? Because even with changing class sizes and making things safe for families, again, there is a big gap in the amount of slots that are available and what the impact is on children, because child care is more than just babysitting and watching a child and making sure that they don't hurt themselves.
Yeah, we're worried because, as we know, those first 5 years, the brain is both has great potential, but also there are hazards if the brain doesn't get what it needs in those early years. And structure and routine and high quality early childhood education are known to be some of the best investments a community can make in terms of long-term outcomes, both for children and for families and the community. And we know how important childcare is to help families move up and out of poverty as well. So we're pretty concerned, and we're going to be talking with Rosa DeLauro in Congress and our senators. There was a national ask of $50 billion to bail out childcare because of this need to fill in. And there was $7 billion put in the House bill. So we know that that's not going to be enough to sustain our providers. But I will say our Connecticut providers are incredibly resilient. In our survey that just closed last week, more than 85% said they plan to reopen, and we need to do all we can to support them because they're really supporting children's brain development. They're supporting families' their ability to move up the economic ladder. And so our communities rely on them. So we're excited to do all we can to help these folks who are on the front lines and supporting Connecticut's economy, but more important, supporting, growing, healthy young children.
Again, you're hearing Commissioner Beth Bye here on Where We Live. She leads the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. I want to thank Elissha Park for joining us. She's a preschool teacher at Educational Playcare in Avon, Connecticut. Elissha, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Coming up, if social distancing must continue for the summer, what does this mean for summer camps? Are you debating whether to keep your child at home? Is this even possible with your job situation? You can join us, 888-720-9677. That's 888-720-WNPR, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. We're talking about how parents and child care providers are weighing options as the state slowly reopens. My guest today is Beth Bye. She's the commissioner of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Now, summertime for many children means participating in day camps or overnight programs, but the pandemic has altered this tradition too. You can join us, especially if you're wondering what that means for your child, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Kristen's calling in. Kristen, what's your question?
Good morning, and good morning, Commissioner Bye. As a parent of a teen who attends overnight camp every summer, we have been looking for guidance from your office and from the governor as to whether or not overnight camps will be allowed to operate this summer. There seems to be a plethora of ambiguity surrounding this topic. Could you please, once and for all, tell us whether or not overnight camps are going to be allowed to open in Connecticut this summer?
Yes, I really appreciate the question, and I have to apologize for the delay in the official announcement. There has been work being done on the reopen executive order, and the camps are part of that executive order, which will be signed as early as tonight. We were hoping to have that done by the end of last week, but there are a lot of parts to that executive order, so it's complicated. At the governor's press conference last week, Paul Mounds announced when asked that overnight camps would not reopen. We are waiting to get that in the executive order for that, to have it be official and legal. But the health committee of the Reopen Connecticut was very clear that they were concerned about overnight camps. And it's disappointing, we know, for families and for programs. But that is the guidance that is expected to come from the governor's office when the executive order is signed, likely this evening.
Commissioner Bye, when you say that there were concerns from the Public Health Committee about overnight camps, tell us more about the concerns. Is it because children would be in close contact, sleeping in quarters with other children? I'm just wondering if you could walk us through what some of the concerns are with overnight camp.
Yeah, I can tell you from listening to the doctors, it was the amount of contact among children, and look, we're looking at very Nothing is totally clear. We have to make difficult decisions, and the Reopen Connecticut group has to make difficult decisions with public health guidance in mind. And I think the idea of children being in cabins for extended periods, sharing that air for that period of time, was a big concern for the committee. And they have to look at the big picture here. So that was the guidance that they provided.
So what does that mean for day camp programs, Commissioner Bye? I was looking on your website. I'm looking at guidance from April 23rd for youth camp guidance. I believe that would be for day camps. And so I'm just wondering how they'll be able to operate this summer.
Yeah, well, it's a great question, Lucy. Many of them face the same challenges that childcare programs face with, smaller groups allowed. That guidance is also in this executive order. The one change from the guidance, there are a couple of changes from the guidance that was there before. One is that the governor has decided that rather than June 29th, the camps can open on June 22nd because of some of the concerns around childcare. But of course, if they open, they have to meet strict public health guidance, which is also group sizes of 10, that they are able to maintain a group, that they socially distance as they can, that, there are masks that the counselors wear and the older children wear to prevent the spread of disease. But camps will be able to reopen based on some of the public health guidance. I think the other change that we expect to come in the executive order today is that families will be notified about comorbidities that are of concern. Again, all of this keeping up with the Center for Disease Control changes in their guidance, but our guidance will very much mirror the Center for Disease Control guidance.
Gary's calling from New Canaan. Gary, you're on the show.
Yes, hi. This is Gary Bloom, Camp Leyland, New Canaan, and I want to thank Commissioner Beth Bye because this is not an easy time. Lots of decisions and lots of moving parts. You just answered some of my questions. We are a day camp, and we know that the landscape is going to be different this summer, and we have developed protocols for that. I guess we're waiting for the final guidelines. I thought the other day when the governor said that we could open June 22nd that was a mistake on his part, but I guess that's going to be changed. The other question, we are thinking about our swimming pools, and I'm wondering if that's part of the new guidelines that will come out tonight.
The pools will be, I think the pools are part of a larger discussion about pools. The Office of Early Childhood has been informing the Health Committee about how pools at camps may be different than public pools. I know there are still some concerns about pools. I'm not 100% positive what the guidance will be, but we know that pools are an important part of summer for kids. And I think there'll be guidance coming out today, but that doesn't mean that as the CDC changes guidance and as Connecticut continues to look at that guidance and work with our Department of Public Health, that things could change on that front. So that's the best answer I can give you at this moment till everything is finalized and signed in the executive order.
Again, you can join Where We Live as we talk about childcare, summer camp options this summer in a pandemic. The number 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Commissioner Beth Bye is with us of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood, and we wanted to get more perspective on what it'll be like to operate a summer day camp program. Keith Garbart's joining us now on Zoom. He's camp director at Winding Trails in Farmington, Connecticut. Keith, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Lucy. Thanks for having me.
So tell us about your camp before the pandemic. How big is it, and how many kids are you serving?
Okay, before the pandemic, we served roughly 650 campers per session, per 2-week session. So almost 2,000 camper slots during the summer, with about 200 staff. Traditional summer day camp that does all your typical activities from archery, swimming to boating, to hiking, climbing, all sorts of stuff. So pre-pandemic, we were a outdoor camp, and we'll continue to be an outdoor camp moving forward.
So what are some of the changes you've had to put in place now that we are in this public health crisis, Keith?
Absolutely. So I think we put contingency plans on top of contingency plans to make sure we can do this safely for this summer. And we appreciate Commissioner Bye in her office providing us with some guidance as far as that goes. So for this summer, camp will certainly look a little bit different, but we hope that the feel of camp will not be too different. We will be doing temperature checks of staff and campers as they come into camp each morning. The small groups, as Commissioner Bye mentioned, we'll have groups of 10, where typically we'd have groups of between 12 and 15. And those groups would commingle, amongst each other. But for this summer, our groups will be self-isolated, kind of their own little units as they walk around our camp. All activities are outdoor activities for us anyways, so we don't have to worry too much about indoors, having campers in indoor spaces. So camp will certainly, like I said, look a little bit different, smaller groups, but I think the counselors are going to have an opportunity to really connect with their small group of campers in a really special way this summer.
What about busing? I know where my children are, there are camps that offer bus service around the neighboring towns. What does that mean for your camp, Keith?
Sure, absolutely. So again, pre-pandemic, we had 10 buses that served the greater Hartford region. This year, we have decided not to do busing for this summer. Also, I don't think there's been guidance that's come out, yet that has even allowed us to do busing. I'm sure that the committee is talking about that. But for this summer, we will do all drop-offs at camp. So we are going to do 3 different waves of drop-offs. Each wave will have, roughly 100 campers coming in at a time, going into their assigned groups. So it'll certainly change things a little bit. And we have thought busing, might hurt our numbers as far as camper numbers, but we've actually seen our camper numbers stay pretty solid throughout that process. So kids and families just want to camp this summer.
Commissioner Bye, what is the guidance on providing buses for these day camps?
Yes, the busing guidance is being worked out along with the summer school busing guidelines. So again, those will be released when we release the guidelines. I know that committee is meeting this afternoon at 3:00. That may be to finalize some of the guidance on busing. All of this, given the pandemic, everything is moving over time, but I expect that any busing will include social distancing, where children try to maintain those groups of 10. And I think if there's busing that we've talked about, that children will need to screen for temperature before they get on the bus. So those are some of the items that are being looked at. And I just have to give a shout out to Keith, who has been a great partner in Winding Trails, has been meeting with us over the course of the past year and working on challenges and issues. And I think this is a particular challenge, and they're willing to open and serve kids following really strict public health guidance. And not all camps are doing that, but I think we recognize that camps are providing some critical childcare for some of those frontline workers and critical experiences for children.
We heard from Jared on Facebook, who writes, camps need time to plan to new guidelines and acquire proper PPE. Every day the state waits to let us know what the guidelines are is one less day we can properly prepare. Commissioner Bye, has the state done enough to get this guidance out? Again, you've mentioned that the governor is going to be having an executive order coming out today, but it just seems like there's still a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of these camp operators and parents are really concerned. What are they going to do this summer?
Yeah, I think it's a really fair question, and I think we all want to get it out as quickly as possible. And CDC issued new guidelines last week, so those had to be taken into account. Also, that's why we went to great lengths to issue a very detailed memo at the end of April, knowing that programs were making these decisions. But all I can do is say, I'm sorry, we were hoping to have them out Friday, but because it's part of a very large reopen executive order, it's not. And we understand the stresses camps are under. I was on the phone with about 20 programs in New Haven last week, all that want to meet their mission of serving children and families, and need this guidance. And we recognize this. We are also listening to some of the concerns around supplies and looking for ways that we can support camps with some of those supplies that are difficult to get.
You can join our conversation 888-720-9677 as we talk about childcare options for the summer, including summer camp programs. We just heard Commissioner Bye say that overnight summer camps are not going to be permitted because of social distancing, the fact that we're still in this public health crisis, but that means that's going to provide a lot of gaps in care for children this summer as parents must return to work. Not everybody can work remotely. Chris is calling in from South Wyndham. Chris, you're on the show.
Hi, thank you very much. Commissioner Bye, we've learned how to safely care for people with developmental disabilities in the homes that remain open during this pandemic. And so our camp has created a plan to do the same for the campers that we support with developmental disabilities who rely on our services as their families need respite. With really drastically reduced numbers, we feel we could support a small number of campers residentially following those same strict guidelines. There may be some other resident camps that have the capacity to do so as well. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Chris, thanks for your call, and you do provide critical services for families. I would be happy to have a conversation with you and the Commissioner of BDS to the extent that you're serving families in DDS, and maybe we could work with them to think about how this matches up with some of their group homes and some of those rules. I think your program's a little different than a lot of the other camps, but I appreciate you calling in with that question.
Mm-hmm. Again, you can join us 888-720-9677 or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Ironically, I just got an email from my son's camp, day camp director, that their camp will not be proceeding this July, and that's certainly disappointing for him when he finds out. But again, Commissioner Bye, I'm just thinking about all of these families who may not qualify for a subsidy for childcare, or the fact that because of smaller enrollment, smaller group sizes, they may not be able to find a slot. What is the state's plan to help all these families that are going to be in limbo?
Well, we're doing our best to check. We're working with 211 Childcare to keep track of supply right now, which has been important. We still do have space in childcare programs in Connecticut that are open, and we hear that more are reopening, I think, to address that challenge. As I mentioned earlier, we are also working with philanthropy to try to support and enhance family childcare capacity, which is small groups. A lot of this is unknown. We don't know what the demand will be. Traditionally, as a childcare director, I can tell you that in the summer, families often choose informal arrangements because of costs, like when they're transitioning to school. But we're tracking it closely. We encourage parents that need help finding childcare to call 211 Childcare, and that really helps us keep track of where the demand and the gaps are. But that's what we're working on right now. We just don't know. I mean, some of the surveys of parents, and certainly my conversation with parents last week, indicated to me that some are going to be waiting a while before sending their kids to group childcare. And then other parents who are sending their children to group childcare at this point have been able to locate licensed care, and 211 Childcare helps them do that. But we know we have a looming challenge. We're working to support programs that are open now with grants because it's called Connecticut Cares for Childcare, and any center or family childcare home that's listening and hasn't signed up for that can go to the Office of Early Childhood website and sign up to get those funds. And those funds are intended to help programs stay open given these challenges. And last week we announced on the Unified Command Call that we'll be extending those grants to programs through the end of June. And then our frontline workers can also get child care subsidies, and that's for incomes up to 85% of the state median income to help them afford childcare through the end of June. So right now those programs are slated through the end of June. So we've been working hard to keep enough supply during the pandemic, and as things reopen, we're just going to have to keep our finger on the pulse and judge what's the demand, how many families are bringing their children back because they're making individual decisions, and then what programs are reopening now because they too are making individual business decisions about when to reopen. Some may decide, I'm going to open in September because summer is traditionally a lower point. So we're also working hard to get information and supplies to programs that are looking to reopen.
Supplies like PPE or proper sanitation?
Yes, we have been supplying programs during the pandemic with hand sanitizer and soap through 7 regional supply locations. And we have limited amount of PPE to help in the transition. I think programs are transitioning. We're also looking through our emergency service function 14 at, as I said, at some grants to programs to help them remain open while enrollment remains low. So we have multiple strategies. It's going to take constant assessment, constant communication with the field. We got a tremendous response to a provider survey where they told us what they would need to reopen. So there's just a lot of unknowns, Lucy, and we're doing our best to assess both demand and supply and keep enough supply for the reopen efforts. But it's going to be a challenge, and I think the challenge is going to play out more perhaps in the late fall than we may see right now. So we're really working on all fronts to try to maintain supply.
You said something earlier, a lot of families may lean on informal arrangements. So when you say that, what do you mean? Having a babysitter come by in the summer so parents can... Okay.
In the summer, a lot of families have college students, or they share a college student who may work for 2 families. And that's just something that families have traditionally done. And we know that during the public health emergency, we were encouraging families, if you can, keep your child home, keep your child home. Second, find trusted neighbors and friends, make sure you check their health status. And third, call 211 Childcare. So, the guidance has been, encouraging smaller groups. And now as things reopen, I think families will return to some of their traditional childcare, but some may not. And that's the unknown, Lucy, that we're trying to figure out. But the Bipartisan Policy Center poll showed that 70% of parents have concerns about returning with their child to a group setting. And I was glad to hear Educational Playcare talking about all that they're doing to maintain the safety of children. And we've had a number of programs open for hospitals and the other programs open. And the track record of the hand washing, the screening for temperature, the small group size is pretty good. It's very good, actually.
When you talk a lot about the unknowns, that parents really have to weigh levels of acceptable risk. This idea that the coronavirus is still out there. We know kids can be silent vectors. Commissioner Bye, we're now hearing that there's this other sickness that some kids have been hospitalized for that might be related to COVID-19. It's really a high time of anxiety.
Yes, it is. It's a high time of anxiety, and I think everybody is doing their best. I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind is we're having this conversation because there's a virus out there, and we don't know everything. But we do know that things like face masks, hand washing, small groups are important. And I will tell you, the other thing we know is that I explained how we're driving people to 211 Childcare to find childcare. And the childcare has been so critical because more than half of the calls coming to 211 Childcare are from hospital workers. And second place is nursing home workers. And third place is home health care workers. So these frontline workers do need childcare. And Governor Lamont has been saying that from the beginning to me is we can't get behind this, Beth. We've got to make sure that those frontline workers have childcare. And then, of course, we had to implement very strict public health guidelines for those childcare programs that were open. Also, one shout out, too, to the family childcare providers who've been providing this critical care during this time and have moved from providing 10% of overall childcare in Connecticut to more than 30% of the overall licensed spaces. So, things are shifting.
You're hearing Commissioner Beth Bye again of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Keith Garbart's also with us. He's camp director at Winding Trails in Farmington, Connecticut. When we come back from a short break, we're going to hear more from Keith about how the day camp day will proceed in this pandemic, more about precautions, social distancing, and what activities can and can't happen at day camps this summer. You can join us too, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. This is Where We Live on Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Again, Connecticut's slowly reopening in a couple of days, and childcare and summer camp providers have a host of new guidelines to follow. With us on Zoom today is Commissioner Beth Bye of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood and Keith Garbart, Camp Director at Winding Trails in Farmington, Connecticut. Keith, so we heard a little bit about how there'll be no buses this year at your camp. People will be dropping off. I'm wondering more about the mask situation. Will all staff have to wear masks, and what about the kids?
Sure, absolutely. So yes, according to the current guidelines, all of our staff will be wearing masks for this summer. We again will encourage campers that are able and to wear masks. We obviously understand the challenges with that, as was mentioned earlier with childcare. So we will encourage it. We do know that, wearing a mask in the summertime outside, could present some issues. So, again, we will certainly have all staff wearing masks every time that they're, working with their children, and then encourage campers to do that. Again, understanding the unique circumstances of having a child wear a mask is unprecedented for sure, and seeing that in the outdoor environment. But we certainly will be following all guidelines that CDC/OEC will be putting out.
What about athletics and other activities and swimming?
Absolutely. So, with us, we do not have a pool. We have an outdoor lake waterfront. So our understanding is, we will, again, contingency plan on top of contingency plan. We have a process of splitting up our, HDOCs that are set up into different quadrants, and being able to get those small groups of 10 to be able to distance from other groups of 10. We feel we can accommodate that, using, a very elaborate, rope system, and kind of, taking, swim lanes to a different degree this summer. But so we will, at this point, be offering swimming unless we're told that we can't offer swimming, but we are making a plan to accommodate that, if we can. As far as athletics, again, it changes the way athletics looks a little bit. While we won't be playing those full court basketball games and soccer and pillow polo, which is a big thing at our camp, we will certainly, figure out ways that we can make those games fun and interactive. We've seen things, we just built a new street hockey area at our camp, and, it was going to be awesome this summer to see it in action. And then, this happened. So, we're going to kind of make it into more of a foosball type street hockey setup that we would do. So the specialists that work with us and my leadership team have been working strongly on making alternative programs and alternative ways to do those sports and activities. So while they, again, may not look the same, they certainly will be able to participate in those activities this summer.
So you're working hard to try to make it fun despite the public health crisis, Keith.
Absolutely. I think this has been a challenge for sure. And I think camp directors and camps, find ways to make things work. And I think my entire leadership group has done a great job trying to accommodate and make this as close to a normal summer as possible. And, again, it gives us some challenges for sure, but it gives us great opportunities this summer as well.
I want to take a quick call. Chris is calling in from Middlebury. Chris, you're on the show.
Hi, Commissioner Bye. First of all, thank you very much for all you and your team are doing during this difficult time. I'm sure it's been quite a challenge. Just a quick question about residential camps. I'm wondering if the committee sort of understood the dynamic of residential camps where basically, facilities have the ability to essentially quarantine campers and staff for weeks at a time. And to me, in some ways, this seems even a safer environment than maybe a day camp setup where you have campers coming in and out on a daily basis with contact to parents and siblings and community members. So I'm wondering if they understood what the ability of a residential camp to kind of put that quarantine in place was. And was that part of their decision, or how did they come to the decision that a residential camp is actually more dangerous?
Thank you, Chris. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. And when you talk about challenges, well, certainly we have challenges at OEC, and my team has been working incredibly hard. I think the challenges at program space and challenges at family space are incredible. And I think you can hear from Keith and other callers and folks working in childcare and camps, all that they're doing to try to keep kids safe and healthy, and also provide children with these critical experiences and families with childcare. I think, the overnight camp thing was a difficult question, and I hear your point. I think if you look at it in the larger context of the reopen, so, this executive order is part of a larger reopen order. In the same group are colleges, and so they've been looking at sort of sleepaway situations and sleepaway camps and what are colleges doing for summer sessions, et cetera. And it all fell under the same sort of grouping of things to consider, of different public health concerns to consider. And it was pretty unanimous among the public health experts on the committee related to overnight camps and to colleges that those should be much later in the summer, which then made the prospect of overnight summer camps seem out of reach. So, I know it's not an easy answer, and these are such critical experiences for kids, lifelong memories. I think the committee took all of that into consideration, but there is a concern around the amount of contact among
Commissioner,
children.
we're almost out of time. I did want to squeeze in a question for Keith and you. What happens, Keith, if a child or a staff member comes down with positive for COVID? What happens in terms of isolating? Or are you going to open, then close, and then open again? I mean, what's the protocol there, Keith?
Sure, absolutely. Obviously, a major worst case scenario, and we certainly plan for that. We will certainly, at our camp, we have a nurse, and that nurse will obviously assess for symptoms and move forward with that. If we do have a quarantine space that we can use at our facility as well. But again, being a day camp, that camper can be picked up, taken home. We will then figure out if they do have a test, if it was confirmed that they do have COVID-19, then we will certainly, that entire group will then be staying home, as well as the staff and any staff that come in contact with that group. And then from there, we'll assess the situation. Do we need to shut down our entire camp? Can we just isolate? Was it just with that group? So it'll have to be a determination that we'll assess together, not just with us, but also with Department of Public Health and OEC to determine if we can continue to open. And then if we can continue to open safely and still use that space, then we will continue to operate camp as planned. Obviously, the quarantine situation will take effect with our campers and staff until they're completely clear and have a non-positive test.
Commissioner Bye, we just have 2 minutes left. Did you want to also put in some comments about the idea that some programs may have to close and then reopen depending on quarantine scenarios?
Yeah, any case is reported to local and state Department of Public Health, and then they make a determination. I think Keith did a good job of explaining, it sort of explains exactly why we have the small groups of 10. And every case is so individual. The few cases we've had with childcare programs have been very different one from the other. So we would just rely on guidance from the Department of Public Health.
And then we got a comment on Facebook. Elissha wants to know, what is the safety recommendations for bringing a babysitter into the home, Commissioner?
Well, I think the safety recommendations are, common sense, making sure your babysitter doesn't come if they have a fever or they're sick, going through enhanced hand washing and cleaning and good, food service, those kinds of things. I think they're good public health practices for them.
And should the babysitter wear a mask and the children in the home no mask?
Well, that would be up because that's a private residence and a private decision. Certainly, the state is recommending that workers in workplaces wear masks as a way to reduce disease transmission.
Well, we want to thank Commissioner Beth Bye for giving us her time today of the Connecticut Office of Early Childhood. Commissioner Bye, thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Lucy.
This is Where We Live. Also, thanks to Keith Garbart, Camp Director at Winding Trails. Keith, good to talk with you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Have a great day.
Today's show produced by Tess Terrible, Carmen Baskoff on the phones. I'm Lucy Nalpathanchel. Thanks for listening.